You have a ministry that focuses in on those who have fought for our freedom, who are working to keep us free, and veterans, military veterans especially, and even law enforcement. Could you just kind of walk through at Mighty Oaks Ministry what it is, and kind of let our listeners know if they haven't heard of you? Some of them have maybe heard of you from Wall Builders or other groups, or just been introduced to you, and because of their own background. But for those who don't know about your ministry, could you kind of introduce us to that?
Yeah, for sure. And again, I do appreciate the opportunity. We are the Mighty Oaks Foundation. All of our information can be found on our website, and there's a ton of stuff there. Mighty Oaks Foundation or mightyoaksprograms.org. Either one will get you there. We serve basically three communities. We serve the veteran community, the active duty service member community, active duty military community, as well as our first responder community. And we're blessed to be able to serve all of those. We also do our best to support families and support the spouses of those who are serving in those areas. And we focus primarily in one area, and that is toward trauma either related to military service. When we started 10 years ago, a lot of folks were coming back from combat after, many years of war, and didn't have an option outside of the Veterans Administration, didn't have a non-clinical option to, find hope and find healing and find purpose again. And we were born out of that. Myself and our founder, Chad Robichaux, both served in the Marine Corps, and are Christians and understand that the path forward really is a path that understands we were created by God, who has a purpose for our life, and we can enter into that. And so that's how we approach this. And for the last, since 2012, we've had the opportunity to serve just over 4,000 folks through our week-long programs. And we have 4 locations across the country where we bring men and women to, and we spend a week with them, really helping them understand trauma, what it is, what it isn't, and how it does not need to have a hold on our lives, how there is hope, there is purpose, there is direction. We spend a week doing that, and again, we've had about 4,000 folks come through that program. And then on the other side, we speak, and again, we've had the doors open to speak to the active duty military community on spiritual resiliency, living a spiritually resilient life, on suicide prevention, and a lot of those other topics. And so God has given us a tremendous open door, and we've seen him do some amazing works through that. And again, I love the word hope. It's what is being offered or presented to those who, in so many cases, feel very hopeless.
And Jeremy, it is true that what people need today is hope. And as it relates to this concept of PTSD, it is so widely experienced. I'm just looking at your website here, in which you say 70% of adults in the United States have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lifetimes. About 7 or 8 out of every 100 people have had PTSD. About 8 million adults have PTSD during a given year. And the statistics just go on and on and on. It's a very serious situation. And, of course, I've dealt with it with people in my circle over the years. So it's a great ministry. My question to you is, how did you get involved with this ministry? And does your history in the military have any connection as to why you got involved with it?
So I'll give you my brief bio because that's my story. I was raised in a pastor's home, which perhaps many of your listeners can relate to. I always joke, and it's only half joking, that the one thing you learn being raised in a pastor's home is that you don't want to be a pastor. So that's a joke I feel very connected to. My dad and mom started a church when I was young, and man, I love them. I love what God was doing, and observing that and the faithfulness. I was very proud of them and thankful for them, but knew that's not what God had for me. So I talked to my dad and said, "Hey, Dad, I'd like to be not in ministry." He said, "Son, do whatever God wants you to do." I said, "I think God wants me to be in the Marine Corps." He said, "God cannot possibly want you to do that." But he supported me through it, and ended up as a commissioned officer in the Marine Corps. I served as an infantry platoon commander with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. And, a lot happened there. But the biggest part of that story, we deployed to Kuwait in January of 2003. And then were part of the initial invasion into Iraq in March of 2003. Our infantry battalion was the Marine Infantry Battalion that breached the berm between Kuwait and Iraq. First KIA of the war was one of our Marines, Shane Childers. And then we marched to Baghdad. The Battle of Baghdad was also our battalion. So that was my combat experience. And, I talk about not wanting to be in ministry because through the process of going into the Marine Corps and while I was doing that, getting plugged into a great local church, God worked in my heart, my wife's heart, to leave the Marine Corps, separate from the Marine Corps, and go into full-time ministry. So what that meant practically was I came home from Iraq in June, and 30 days later, I was out of the Marine Corps and working on a church staff, which was a rough transition. And it seems like it would be a good one. It was a very difficult transition for me, to the point that I was causing so much chaos at home and even in my job. My kids didn't want to have anything to do with me. My wife, I'm thankful for the grace of God in her life. That's the only thing that kept her with me. And then my pastor, who I was working for, and I was trying to, serve on a church staff, he called me into his office one day after about a year and said, this isn't working. You've got to figure out what's going on. And if you can't figure it out, I'm going to have to help you find another job. And, up to that point, I blamed everyone else for what I was experiencing. I felt like I had done something important and that something was coming to an end. But through that process, God showed me that I needed to take responsibility for myself. And as I did, healing, began to come, and I was able to repair many of those relationships, by God's grace. And from that point forward, stopped looking back over my shoulder, stopped looking to my military service, and got very involved in what God had called me to do. Eventually, I pastored a church. I was a senior pastor of a church in the San Francisco area. And through all of that, through all of those experiences, God then brought me to a place where I met Chad Robichaux, who is our founder. As he was founding the organization, he said, "You've got both ministry and military background. I need that. I don't know exactly how to pull all this together. Can you help me?" And that was in 2012, and we've been working on this ever since. I like to share that story for a lot of reasons, but one is to say, whatever it is you're involved in right now, if God has you there, God's going to bring all of those pieces together for his purpose and his will.